The forest was silent, except for the soft rustle of leaves in the cold, misty morning. A thick fog hung low over the ground, making every shadow seem alive. High above, alien trees twisted toward the sky, their strange branches moving as if they had a mind of their own. In this world, every sound could mean danger. Two young predator cubs crouched low behind a fallen log. Their eyes glowed faintly in the mist, sharp and alert. They were almost the same size, almost the same strength, but neither would back down. One of them, dark fur with streaks of silver, let out a low growl. His muscles tensed as he prepared to spring. The other cub, smaller but faster, hissed and bared his teeth. His tail flicked like a whip. Both cubs circled each other slowly, their claws digging into the wet soil. Every movement was calculated. Every twitch could be the difference between victory and injury. A sudden snap of a branch under a paw made them both freeze. Their eyes met, bright and fierce. Then, with a sudden leap, the fight began. Claws clashed, teeth snapped, and the sounds echoed through the dense forest. Dust and leaves flew in every direction as they rolled and spun, each trying to get the upper hand. Watching from the shadows was their mother, Alpha. Her eyes were sharp, cold, and calculating. She had raised them to be strong, to survive, but she also knew how deadly they could be if left unchecked. She did not move. She did not intervene. Yet, every flick of her tail, every slight shift in her gaze showed that she was ready to act in a heartbeat. The silver-streaked cub lunged, aiming for his sibling's neck, but the smaller cub twisted just in time. His claws scratched the larger one's shoulder. A low yelp echoed, but neither stopped. Alpha's eyes narrowed. She realized she could break one of their necks with a single motion if she wanted. Yet, she did not. She let them test themselves, letting instinct and raw power decide. The fight spilled into a small clearing. Sunlight pierced the mist in long, thin beams. Every strike, every dodge, every hiss was visible now. The cubs were panting heavily, their fur matted with dirt and moisture. Yet, they were relentless. Their fight was not just for dominance. It was a lesson, a test of who they were becoming. Suddenly, the smaller cub feinted left and then struck right, knocking the other off balance. The larger cub stumbled, falling onto the soft moss. For a moment, the smaller one paused, ready to attack again. Alpha's gaze cut through the fog. A single growl rumbled from deep in her chest. The cub froze, recognizing the warning. She did not need to step forward. Her power alone was enough to stop them. Breathing heavily, the cubs paused. They looked at each other, eyes filled with respect and frustration. The fight was far from over, but the first round had ended. Alpha's presence reminded them of the boundaries they could not cross. She had taught them a silent lesson. Strength without control could be dangerous, even deadly. A sudden sound in the forest made both cubs jump. Something was moving beyond the clearing. It was not one of them. It was larger, more dangerous, something that made even their first stand on end. The cubs glanced at their mother. Her ears twitched. Her gaze followed the movement. The fight forgotten for the moment, the cubs realized the forest had more challenges than just each other. Alpha stepped forward slowly, her claws barely making a sound on the soft moss. She did not attack, but her presence alone commanded respect. The cubs shuffled closer, instinctively knowing that they were under her protection, but also that she demanded obedience and awareness. The mist thickened again, swallowing the shadows and turning familiar trees into strange, threatening shapes. The cubs could feel the tension in the air. They were hunters, yes, but the forest was alive, watching, testing them as much as they tested each other. Every snap, every rustle could be a predator, or worse. Alpha crouched low, scanning the horizon. She did not need to speak. Her eyes said everything. The cubs understood. They had survived the first test. But the real lessons, the ones that would make them strong, smart, and deadly, were yet to come. With a final glance at the clearing, Alpha turned and disappeared silently into the fog. The cubs followed, their muscles still tense, their minds racing with adrenaline. They were alive, unbroken, but changed. Something deep inside them had shifted. They had felt fear, power, and respect all in one fight, and they knew this was only the beginning. The forest whispered around them. full of unknown dangers and unseen eyes. Somewhere, a faint roar echoed in the distance. The cubs stiffened, ears high, tails twitching. Alpha's growl rumbled softly behind them. She had not moved, but the warning was clear. They were predators, yes, but the forest had lessons even stronger than teeth and claws. And somewhere, deep in the mist, a shadow waited, watching. The morning fog still lingered over the alien forest, twisting around the tall, strange trees like living snakes. The two cubs padded silently through the undergrowth, muscles still tense from the fight. Their breaths came in short, sharp bursts, their ears flicking at every sound. Behind them, Alpha moved like a shadow, graceful and silent, her eyes sharp and watchful. The cubs glanced at each other, a mix of pride and fear in their expressions. Neither spoke, but both understood the silent lesson from the previous clash. Strength mattered, but control mattered more. Alpha paused beside a fallen tree, her nose lifted to the air. She sniffed carefully, reading the forest like a book. The cubs watched her, waiting for instruction. They had learned long ago that Alpha rarely spoke, but her every action carried meaning. She could teach lessons without words. Today, her eyes were full of thought. She remembered her own youth, the dangers she had faced, the fights she had survived. She remembered the predator that had once challenged her, stronger and faster, almost ending her life. The memory was sharp, painful, and it made her decisions now all the more careful. The silver-streaked cub stepped closer to Alpha. "Mother, why didn't you stop us?" he asked, his voice small but steady. Alpha's gaze softened, but her eyes remained fierce. "Because you needed to learn," she said simply. "Strength without control is dangerous. You must understand the cost before it is too late." The smaller cub frowned. "But what if one of us had been hurt badly?" Alpha's tail twitched. "Then I would have acted. But I waited. You must learn to test yourself, and to respect limits. You must feel fear so you can know what it is to survive." The cubs were silent. The words were heavy, but they understood the truth. They had felt fear yesterday, had faced pain, and had survived. That experience would shape them more than any words could. A sudden rustle in the bushes made the cubs jump. Their ears flattened. Alpha's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing. A low growl escaped her throat. It was a warning, soft but deadly. The cubs froze. They knew the sound was not their fight, nor of any creature they had trained against. Something larger, older, hung in the shadows. "Stay close," Alpha said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and move carefully." The cubs followed, stepping lightly over roots and rocks. Every sense was alert. They understood now that the forest was not just a playground for fights. It was a place of lessons, danger, and survival. Alpha moved like she belonged to it, not just walking but blending, becoming part of the mist and shadow. Hours passed in cautious silence. Alpha stopped by a small stream, its water bubbling and glowing faintly under the alien sunlight. She crouched and drank, motioning for the cubs to do the same. As they lapped at the water, she scanned the trees, her sharp eyes catching every movement. The silver-streaked cub looked at her and whispered, "Mother, when do we fight again?" Alpha's ears twitched. She did not answer immediately. Her mind ran through possibilities, risks, and lessons. "You will fight again," she said finally, "but only when you are ready. Not to prove strength, but to learn it. Every fight must have a purpose." The smaller cub tilted his head. "How do we know when we are ready?" "You will feel it," Alpha replied. "And when the time comes, you must decide for yourself what is right. That is the difference between a hunter and a reckless fighter." Suddenly, the forest shivered with movement. Leaves rustled unnaturally. Alpha froze, her body low, muscles coiled. The cubs looked around, their hearts racing. Something was approaching, something big. A low growl echoed from deep in the forest, vibrating through the ground. Alpha's eyes glowed. She stepped between the cubs and the sound, her stance protective but confident. The cubs realized then that her power was not only in her strength. It was in her wisdom, her judgment, her ability to know when to act and when to wait. The growl grew louder, closer. A shadow moved in the fog, massive and fast. The cubs wanted to charge, to attack, but Alpha held them back with a subtle flick of her tail. Wait, she commanded silently. Watch. Learn. The shadow revealed itself. A predator far larger than any the cubs had seen, its eyes burning like hot coals. It paused at the edge of the clearing. Sniffing the air, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The cubs' hearts pounded, adrenaline mixing with fear. This was not a fight for dominance. This was survival. Alpha's lips curled into a low, warning snarl. She made herself look bigger, more threatening, every muscle taut with power. The cubs watched, wide-eyed. They understood the lesson. Strength was nothing without intelligence, control, and timing. After a tense moment, the predator retreated into the mist, disappearing silently. Alpha relaxed slightly, but did not lower her guard. The cubs exhaled in relief. They had survived, not by fighting, but by learning, observing, and trusting their mother's guidance. Alpha turned to the cubs, her eyes softening. You are ready for more, she said. But the real test is not against each other. It is against the forest, the challenges in yourself. The cubs nodded, feeling a mix of fear, excitement, and understanding. They had learned their first lesson. Strength was important, but control, patience, and wisdom were far more powerful. The forest around them whispered again, full of unseen eyes and hidden dangers. And somewhere, deeper in the mist, a low, menacing growl hinted that the challenges were only beginning. The forest was alive in a way the cubs had only begun to understand. Every rustle, every shadow, every faint sound of movement was a test. The fog still clung to the tall alien trees, but the sun was starting to break through, scattering pale light across the mossy ground. Alpha moved carefully, leading her cubs deeper into the forest. The silver-streaked cub stumbled slightly over a twisted root. Alpha's eyes flicked to him, sharp and alert. A low rumble of a growl escaped her throat. Not anger, but warning. The cub froze, realizing that every step in this forest carried risk. Alpha stopped by a shallow clearing filled with strange, luminescent plants. Watch carefully, she said, her voice calm but commanding. Everything here is a lesson. You do not just hunt with teeth or claws. You hunt with your mind, your senses, your patience. The smaller cub looked around, confused. But mother, how do we learn from plants? Alpha's eyes glinted, not the plants themselves. Watch how the forest moves. Smells change. The air carries warnings. Prey leaves tracks. Danger leaves a trail. Everything speaks if you know how to listen. The cubs crouched low, observing as Alpha demonstrated. She moved silently, scanning the ground and air, noticing tiny scratches on tree trunks, footprints half buried in moss, even faint scents carried by the wind. Every detail told a story, where prey had gone, where a predator might hide. Now you try, Alpha said. The cubs hesitated, but then moved forward. They sniffed the air, looked at footprints, listened to rustles in the distance. Slowly, they began to notice patterns, small clues that only the sharpest eyes and ears could detect. Alpha watched silently, her tail flicking in approval. Suddenly, a bird-like creature burst in the trees, startling the cubs. They leaped instinctively, claws ready, teeth bared. Alpha's low growl stopped them instantly. Patience, she said. You do not attack everything. You must decide, is it threat or noise? Life is wasted when you act without thought. The cubs nodded, trying to control their racing hearts. The lesson was clear. Survival was more than raw power. It was knowledge, timing, and restraint. Hours passed, and Alpha led them to a shallow stream. The water shimmered under the sunlight. Hunting is not always about chasing, she said. Sometimes you wait. Sometimes you observe. Sometimes you need to understand before you strike. She crouched low, her eyes following a fish gliding in the water. Patience and speed together make a predator lethal. The cubs tried the exercise, their small bodies tense with focus. They watched, waited, and struck only when Alpha gave a subtle nod. Each success, each small capture of a fish, built their confidence. Every failure taught them humility. As the day went on, the forest began to feel different. Sound that once seemed random now held meaning. A snapping twig might mean prey or predator. A sudden gust of wind could hide danger or carry it toward them. The cubs began to sense the forest's rhythm, learning from every step they took, every leaf that trembled. But lessons were never simple. While the cubs focused on hunting and patience, Alpha's ears twitched at a faint, deeper sound. A predator was near, not one of her cubs' rivals, but something larger, older, stronger. She signaled the cubs to freeze, pressing them against the damp ground. They obeyed, hearts pounding, eyes wide. The shadow moved between the trees. Its growl rumbled like distant thunder. The cubs' fur bristled. Alpha did not move forward. Instead, she allowed the shadow to pass, showing her cubs another lesson. Sometimes survival is not about fighting, but about avoiding conflict until the right moment. The cubs learned quickly. They watched every movement, every subtle shift in the shadow's approach, absorbing knowledge like sponges. By the time the threat disappeared into the mist, the cubs had learned more than a single fight could teach. They had learned fear, patience, observation, and judgment, all essential tools for survival. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the forest in golden hues, Alpha gathered her cubs. "Today, you learn much more than claws or teeth can teach," she said. "You learn to see. You learn to think. You learn control." The cubs nodded, exhaustion and excitement mixing in their young bodies. The lessons of the day were heavy, but necessary. They understood that the forest was not just a place to play or fight. It was a living test, full of challenges, dangers, and opportunities. Alpha's eyes scanned the horizon. In the distance, a faint movement caught her attention. Something was out there, silent, patient, and watching. The cubs noticed her alertness and followed her gaze. The forest, they realized, held more than prey and rivals. It held mysteries and threats they had yet to face. The silver-streaked cub whispered to his sibling, "Do you think we're ready for anything?" The smaller cub shook his head. "Not yet, but we're learning." Alpha's low growl rumbled in agreement. "Learning is survival," she said. "And survival is just a beginning." The forest seemed to hold its breath around them, full of unseen eyes and unknown dangers. The cubs understood now. Every day brought a new lesson. Every step could be life or death, and their journey becoming true hunters had only just begun. The sun had begun to dip behind the twisted alien trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The mist curled around the trunks like ghostly fingers. Alpha led her cubs cautiously, their senses sharp, muscles tense. Today, the forest felt different. Danger was not just in the trees or the mist. It was approaching from somewhere else. A rustle ahead made the cubs freeze. Their ears twitched, eyes scanning the shadows. Alpha crouched low, muscles coiled. She could smell it first, a foreign scent, sharp and strong. Another predator pack. The silver-streaked cub whispered to his sibling, "Mother, another pack? Are they bigger than us?" Alpha's eyes narrowed. Size does not always matter. Strategy does. Watch and learn. From the undergrowth, shadows moved with calculated grace. 4 adult predators emerged, sleek and strong, their eyes glinting with hunger and curiosity. They were larger than the cubs, but not as powerful as Alpha. Their leader, a dark-furred male with scars on his face, growled low, announcing their intent. The cubs stiffened. They had never seen rivals this close. The forest felt colder, the air heavier. Every instinct screamed at them to run, but Alpha remained calm, a pillar of silent power. The rival leader circled the clearing, eyes locked on Alpha. "This is our territory," he growled. "Step aside or we take it." Alpha did not flinch. Her tail lashed slowly, a warning. Her growl rolled deep from her chest, resonating through the trees. "You will not threaten my cubs," she said, her voice firm, steady. "Leave now or face me." The rival male bared his teeth, a snarl that promised pain. He moved closer. The cubs crouched behind Alpha, hearts hammering. They had seen their mother fight, but never like this. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first strike. Alpha's eyes glinted. With a sudden roar, she launched herself forward, not to attack immediately, but to intimidate. Her claws scraped the moss, and her teeth flashed in the dim light. The rivals paused, caught off guard by the sheer force of her presence. The cubs watched, awe and fear mixing in their minds. Alpha's strategy was clear. She did not just rely on strength. She used timing, presence, and understanding of her enemy's fear. The rival circled again, wary, testing her. One of the rivals lunged toward the cubs. Instinctively, the silver-streaked cub growled and leaped forward, but Alpha's sharp bark stopped him. "Wait," she commanded. "You are not ready. Watch and learn." The rival male paused, noticing the cubs now, and hissed in frustration. Alpha seized the moment, moving with precision, claws raking through the soil, teeth flashing, forcing the rival back. She did not attack fully, yet every motion told the pack she was a force they could not easily defeat. The cubs absorbed everything. The way Alpha positioned herself, the timing of her movements, the subtle signals that controlled the fight without unnecessary risk. It was more than a battle. It was a lesson in strategy, patience, and dominance. After tense moments, the rival leader hissed and signaled retreat. The pack slunk back into the shadows, disappearing as silently as they had appeared. The forest relaxed slightly, the mist curling back around the trees. The cubs exhaled in relief, their bodies still tense. The silver-streaked cub looked at his mother. "Mother, you didn't even fight them fully." "Why?" Alpha's eyes softened, but her gaze remained sharp. Because fighting is not always about winning. It is about teaching. It is about knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to let your presence speak for you. You learn more today than any battle could teach. The smaller cub nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. We saw fear and respect from them. "Exactly," Alpha said. "A true hunter does not need to prove strength at every turn. Strength with wisdom is the most powerful of all." The cubs followed her deeper into the forest, silent but thoughtful. The forest had tested them again, not with teeth or claws this time, but with intelligence, courage, and observation. Each step forward was a lesson, each shadow a challenge, each rustle of leaves a warning. As they moved, a low, distant roar echoed to the misty trees. Alpha's ears twitched. She stopped listening. The cubs stiffened, realizing that the challenges were far from over. The forest was alive, and something greater than rival packs or small fights was coming. Alpha glanced at her cubs, her eyes calm but determined. "Remember," she said softly, "the forest is bigger than you, bigger than any rival. Respect it, learn from it, survive in it. And one day, you will understand everything I have taught you." The cubs nodded, hearts racing, minds sharp. They had survived the rival pack's test today. But in the distance, hidden in the fog and shadow, a more dangerous challenge waited, patient, silent, and deadly. The forest whispered its secrets, and the cubs realized survival was not just about strength. It was about knowledge, timing, and courage. And soon, they would be tested like never before. The forest had grown darker as the sun dipped lower behind the alien trees. Mist curled around the trunks, and shadows stretched long across the mossy floor. The cubs followed Alpha closely, muscles tense and senses alert. The forest no longer felt like a playground. Every step could be dangerous. "Stay close," Alpha warned, her low growl vibrating through the air. The cubs obeyed, eyes wide, ears flicking at every sound. They had survived rival packs, learned patience, and observed the forest's hidden dangers. But something else was coming. Something far more dangerous. A faint rustle echoed from a nearby clearing. The silver-streaked cub froze. "Mother, do you hear that?" Alpha's eyes narrowed. She sniffed the air. "Yes, something is ahead. Move carefully." The cubs crouched low as they crept toward the sound. At first, it seemed like an ordinary patch of undergrowth. But then, the smaller cub stepped on a thin branch, snapping it loudly. The forest seemed to pause. Alpha stiffened, sensing the trap instantly. From the shadows, a net of thick, thorny vines shot up, catching the smaller cub's leg. He yelped in shock, struggling to break free. The silver-streaked cub leaped forward, claws extended, trying to tear the vines apart. But the tangle was strong, fast, and unyielding. Alpha's growl rolled through the clearing, low and dangerous. She moved forward with silent power, her eyes scanning for the source. The trap had been set deliberately, another predator or a hidden danger of the forest itself. Either way, her cubs were in immediate danger. "Hold still," Alpha commanded. Her claws slashing through the vines were precise, control movements. She freed the smaller cub, shaking off the remaining thorns. "Do not move recklessly," she warned. "This forest teaches with pain as well as knowledge." The cubs were trembling, hearts racing. The silver-streaked cub glanced at Alpha. "Mother, why would someone set a trap for us?" Alpha's eyes were sharp. "Because the forest is full of challenges, predators, rivals, and even the land itself will test you. A true hunter must learn to see danger before it strikes, and to survive it when it does." She led them forward slowly, eyes scanning the shadows. Another trap lay ahead. Alpha could feel it. The vines, roots, and subtle depressions in the moss all spoke a silent warning to her trained senses. She stopped the cubs just in time, noticing a thin wire stretched across the clearing. One wrong step, and it could trigger another hidden danger. The cubs crouched, teeth bared, watching their mother move with uncanny precision. Every motion was deliberate, every decision calculated. Alpha's teaching went beyond fighting. It was about observation, caution, and intelligence. The cubs realized survival was about more than strength. It was about awareness, patience, and instinct. Suddenly, a loud snap echoed from the distance. Something large was moving nearby, hidden by the mist. The cub's fur bristled. Alpha's ears twitched. She pressed them close, moving low and silent, ready for anything. Then, a figure emerged from the fog, another predator, much larger than the cubs had ever seen. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, and its movements were smooth, lethal, and purposeful. The cubs froze, fear coursing through their veins. They wanted to run, but Alpha held them firmly. "Watch," she whispered. "Learn. Survive." The predator approached the trap Alpha had just navigated. Its foot caught the hidden wire, and a hidden snare snapped, barely missing it. The creature hissed, furious but unharmed. The cubs watched with wide eyes. Alpha was teaching them another lesson. Survival sometimes meant observing the mistakes of others, learning from near disasters, and staying calm under pressure. Alpha led the cubs around the snare carefully. "The forest teaches all predators," she said. "Some lessons hurt. Some kill. You must always see danger first, before it sees you." The cubs nodded, hearts still racing. They had felt fear, adrenaline, and respect all at once. The silver-streaked cub whispered, "Mother, I think I understand now. Strength is not enough. You need everything: wisdom, patience, and caution." Alpha's growl rumbled softly. "Exactly. You are learning. But these lessons are only the beginning. The forest holds greater challenges, tests that will push you to your limits. Only those who survive the traps, the rivals, and the unknown will become true hunters." As night began to fall, the mist thickened, curling around the trees and swallowing the clearing. The cubs followed Alpha silently, minds sharp, muscles tense, ready for whatever came next. They understood that the forest was alive, that danger lurked in every shadow, and that the lessons of survival were far from over. And somewhere deeper in the mist, hidden eyes watched, patient and waiting. The cubs had survived the first trap, but the forest had many more, each more dangerous than the last. The real test of courage, intelligence, and survival was only beginning. The forest was alive with movement as the morning sun pierced through the alien mist. Alpha led her cubs silently, muscles coiled, senses alert. Today was not a day for lessons or testing. It was a day to hunt. The prey ahead was fast, clever, and dangerous. Survival depended on skill, teamwork, and timing. The silver-streaked cub crouched low, ears flicking. "Mother, what if we fail?" he whispered, voice tight with anticipation. Alpha's eyes glinted. "Then we learn and we try again. But today, we hunt together. Watch me, follow my lead, and act only when I signal." The cubs nodded, muscles tense. They had learned patience, observation, and control. Now it was time to put it all into practice. A faint rustle echoed from the dense undergrowth. The prey, a sleek, four-legged creature with bright, alert eyes, paused, sniffing the air. Its fur shimmered with the forest mist. It was cautious, quick, and aware. The cubs' hearts pounded. This was no ordinary hunt. Alpha crouched, moving silently closer, muscles taut like springs. She signaled the cubs with a flick of her tail. They mirrored her movements, careful not to make a sound. Step by step, they closed the distance, stalking the prey with calculated patience. Suddenly, the prey darted to the left, tried to escape through a narrow path in the trees. The silver-streaked cub lunged instinctively, but Alpha barked sharply, stopping in midair. "Wait," she commanded. "Observe first. Move second." The smaller cub hesitated, fear and excitement mixing. He had learned patience, but the instinct to strike was strong. Alpha's eyes locked on his, and he understood. Control, timing, and strategy mattered more than raw speed. The prey paused again, sensing movement, its ears flicking. Alpha made a subtle motion, guiding the cubs silently around the open ground. Each step was deliberate, calculated. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Then came the strike. Alpha lunged first, claws scraping the moss, teeth aimed but not recklessly. The cubs followed in perfect timing, one from the left, one from the right, encircling the prey. They had become a coordinated team, each understanding the other's movements without a word spoken. The prey twisted, attempting escape, but Alpha anticipated every move. The silver-streaked cub adjusted, trapping the prey against a fallen tree. The smaller cub struck with precision, forcing the creature to slow, cornered but still alive. The forest echoed with the sounds of struggle, soft growls, the rustle of leaves, and the pounding of paws. Finally, Alpha made the decisive move. With a swift, controlled strike, she brought the prey down, not recklessly, but efficiently. The cubs stared in awe, hearts racing, realizing the lesson. Hunting was not about brute force. It was about skill, timing, intelligence, and teamwork. Breathing heavily, the cubs circled their mother, eyes shining with pride and newfound understanding. They had witnessed and participated in a true hunt. They had applied every lesson: patience, observation, control, strategy, and courage. Alpha's low growl rumbled through the clearing. "You've done well today. But remember, this is only the beginning. The forest will continue to test you, and prey will not always be this easy." The cubs nodded, their muscles trembling with exhaustion, but their minds sharp. The hunt had bonded them as a team, showing them that strength alone was useless without wisdom, timing, and cooperation. As the forest quieted, the mist swirling around the trees, the cubs realized how much they had grown. The silver-streaked cub whispered to his sibling, "I think we're ready for anything." The smaller cub nodded slowly, still catching his breath. "Yes, we've learned so much." Alpha's tail flicked once, approving. "Good. But always remember, the forest is larger than any hunt. Bigger challenges await, stronger prey, and unknown predators. Today was a test, but tomorrow the real lessons will begin." Suddenly, a faint roar echoed through the trees, distant but unmistakable. The cubs stiffened. They had survived rivals, traps, and their own doubts, but the forest was not done with them. The shadowy sound carried a promise of danger, a hint of challenges greater than anything they had faced. Alpha's ears twitched, eyes glowing in the soft light. She nudged the cubs forward, moving with silent grace. "Come," she said softly. "We move. The hunt is over, but the forest never sleeps. And neither can we." The cubs followed, hearts pounding with adrenaline and excitement. They had faced their greatest test yet and survived. But deep in the mist, hidden eyes watched, and the next challenge waited, silent and patient, promising lessons that would push them further than they had ever imagined. The forest whispered around them, alive, endless, and unpredictable. And the cubs knew this. Every hunt, every shadow, every challenge was preparing them for something far greater.